May 7, 1942. Coral Sea. 1847 hours. Japanese pilot entered landing pattern. American carrier below. USS Yorktown. Landing signal officer raised paddles. Guided aircraft toward deck. Everything normal. Then he saw it. Landing gear wrong. Too wide. Fixed position. Red circle on fuselage. Japanese bomber. Seconds from touchdown. Before this moment, no enemy had approached American carrier for landing. After, procedures would change forever. One officer noticed. One detail wrong. One carrier saved from impossible disaster. How did Japanese pilots mistake American carrier for their own? How close did they come to landing? Watch what happened when exhausted pilots found wrong ship in gathering darkness. This was Battle of Coral Sea. First carrier versus carrier combat in history. Ships never saw each other. Aircraft fought battles 200 miles away. Rules of warfare were being rewritten in real time. Nobody knew all the rules yet. May 7, 1942, 14:00 hours, 200 miles south of Guadalcanal. Admiral Takagi launched strike package from carriers Zuikaku and Shokaku. 27 aircraft total. Mix of D-3E Val dive, bombers and B-5 torpedo planes. Target. American cruiser group reported by reconnaissance. Intelligence said cruisers. Intelligence was wrong. Japanese carriers operated blind. No radar. Only visual spotting and scout planes. Americans had technological edge they did not yet fully understand. USS Yorktown and USS Lexington carried CXM radar, could detect aircraft at 100 miles, track formations, vector fighters to intercept. Japanese strike group flew straight into ambush. 14:47 hours. American radar operators aboard Yorktown detected incoming formation. Range 68 miles. Bearing 278 degrees. Altitude 12,000 feet. Commander John Thach launched combat air patrol. 8 Grumman 4th Wildcats climbed hard toward intercept point. Japanese pilots never knew Americans were waiting. 15:23 hours. Wildcats hit Japanese formation 40 miles from carriers. Attacked from sun. Scattered carefully organized strike. Japanese pilots broke formation. Jettisoned bombs to lighten aircraft. Fought for survival against enemy they had not expected. 3 aircraft went down in first 90 seconds. 6 more damaged. Strike package shattered. Lieutenant Commander Shigekatsu Shimazaki fought his way clear. Lost sight of wingman. Navigation equipment limited to compass and dead reckoning. Fuel gauge showed 40% remaining. Sun setting fast. Dusk approaching. Finding carrier in daylight was challenging. Finding carrier at night was nearly impossible. Night carrier landings in 1942 killed experienced pilots regularly. Shimazaki turned south, hoped to find Zuikaku before darkness fell completely. 16:15 hours. Japanese formations scattered across 400 square miles of ocean, each pilot navigating independently. Radio silence maintained. Fuel gauges dropping. Western sky still held light. Eastern sky already dark. Then pilots spotted what they desperately needed. Flat deck, island superstructure, aircraft visible on deck. Carrier found. Relief flooded through exhausted pilots. They entered landing pattern, began circling carrier at 800 feet. Some activated blinker lights, signaled landing officers. Nobody aboard that carrier spoke Japanese. Bill Sergey stood on Yorktown's flight deck, aviation mechanic with VF-42. Watched strange aircraft join landing pattern. Light remained in western sky. Darkness spread from east. Silhouettes looked wrong. Sergey later reported, "Group of aircraft circled task force sending blinker light signals we did not recognize. This group joined our landing pattern. Signals did not match American procedures. But confusion was normal after day of combat, multiple carriers operating in same area. aircraft from different ships landing wherever they could. Lieutenant Junior Grade Elbert McCuskey searched for his own carrier in gathering darkness. Saw 3 aircraft circling with American planes. Assumed they were friendly from another carrier. McCuskey landed aboard Yorktown. Walked to ready room. Someone finally realized those 3 aircraft overhead were Japanese. 1847 hours. First Japanese bomber began final approach. Landing signal officer prepared to guide it aboard. Paddles raised. Standard procedure. Watch aircraft drift closer. Then he noticed landing gear configuration. Too wide. Fixed position. Wrong type. Looked at fuselage. Saw red circle clearly. Japanese meatball insignia. Elzo frantically waved paddles. Wave off signal. Abort, abort, go around. Japanese pilot responded instantly. Throttle forward. Pulled away at last possible second. Captain Elliot Buckmaster's voice crackled across intercom. Order that had not been heard on American warship in decades. Stand by to repel boarders. Command from age of sail. When enemy ships pulled alongside. When sailors fought with cutlasses and pistols. Nobody expected those words on modern carrier, but Japanese dive bomber screamed past port side, red circle visible in fading light. Every gunner understood exactly what repel boarders meant. Every gun opened fire. 50 caliber machine guns, 40 mm Bofors, 20 mm Oerlikon, 5-inch deck guns. Streams of tracer fire lit evening sky. Wall of lead reaching toward Japanese aircraft. Leading bomber took multiple hits, went down hard, crashed into ocean 200 yards from carrier. Other Japanese pilots saw their leader abort. Saw a wall of fire. Throttle slammed forward, banked hard away from carrier. But real danger was just beginning. American gunners fired at everything in sky. Tracer rounds everywhere. 50 caliber fire and 40 mm shells reaching toward any silhouette. Problem was simple. American 4th Wildcats were still in landing pattern, trying to get aboard before full darkness. Friendly fire from their own carrier. Ensign William Barnes managed to land. Oil cooler shot up by Yorktown's guns. Climbed out of cockpit ready to fight. Demanded to know why they were shooting at him. Chaos was complete. Japanese bombers fleeing through anti-aircraft fire. American fighters trying desperately to land while their own ship shot at them. Gunners could not distinguish friend from foe in gathering darkness. Bill Sergey described scene. It was like fireworks with tracers going into any aircraft that went by. I guess they got the idea we were not theirs. Through wall of anti-aircraft fire, most Japanese pilots escaped, scattered into darkness, throttles wide open, banking and jinking to throw off gunners' aim. Bombers disappeared into night, headed south toward where they hoped their carriers waited. Behind them, Yorktown sorted out chaos. American fighters finally waved aboard. Deck handlers approached each aircraft with weapons drawn. Confirmed American markings before allowing pilot to exit. Last of combat air patrol landed showing various damage, some from Japanese fighters encountered earlier, others from their own carriers' guns. 1859 hours. All American aircraft recovered. Yorktown secured from general quarters. 1 Japanese bomber destroyed. 0 successful enemy landings. Disaster avoided by seconds. Japanese pilots who escaped Yorktown's guns faced desperate flight back to own carriers. Already low on fuel after hours of flying, now had to find ships in complete darkness. No navigation aids beyond compasses, no radio communication, no guidance. Of approximately 27 Japanese aircraft that launched that morning, losses were catastrophic. American fighters shot down 9 during initial interception, at least 1 more destroyed by Yorktown's guns during landing attempt. Then came nightmare of night recovery. Multiple aircraft crashed into ocean attempting to land on own carriers in complete darkness. Some ran out of fuel before finding any carrier. Records conflict on exact numbers. Some indicate only 4 aircraft successfully recovered. Others suggest as many as 18 made it back. All agree mission was disaster. More than half strike force lost. Lieutenant Shimazaki was among those who made it back. Landed aboard Zuikaku at 1934 hours. Fuel tank nearly empty. Aircraft damaged from combat. He reported to Admiral Takagi. Described ambush by American fighters. Confusion in darkness. Near landing on what he now realized was enemy carrier. Takagi listened in silence. Losses were unacceptable. Intelligence had been wrong about target. Americans had detected strike group before arrival. Technological advantage was clear. Japanese carriers operated blind while Americans tracked every aircraft. Post-war interrogations revealed Japanese confusion that evening. Multiple pilots reported spotting carriers, attempting to land, being waved off or driven away by gunfire. Some never realized they had approached American ships. Thought they were being fired on by nervous Japanese gunners. Incident lasted perhaps 10 minutes, from moment LSO first noticed something wrong until last Japanese bomber disappeared into darkness. But those 10 minutes revealed something crucial about new type of warfare. Carrier aviation was so new, distinction between friend and foe so difficult in poor visibility. Even experienced pilots could become confused about whose carrier they approached. Japanese pilots were not incompetent. They were exhausted after hours of flying, combat, navigation in deteriorating weather. They found exactly what they were looking for. Carrier. Training took over. Enter pattern. Signal for landing. Follow LSO's instructions. American pilots equally confused. McCuskey actually landed on Yorktown thinking Japanese planes were from another American carrier. In chaos of first carrier versus carrier battle in history, nobody was entirely sure who was who. Only reason incident did not end in disaster was one landing signal officer noticed wrong landing gear configuration. Frantically waved off aircraft that was seconds from touching down. That officer's name was lost to history, never recorded in official reports. But his split-second recognition saved Yorktown from impossible situation. What would have happened if Japanese bomber landed successfully? Scenario played out in war games later. Conclusions were grim. Aircraft would have been destroyed immediately by deck crew, pilot captured or killed, but confusion would have been enormous. Other Japanese aircraft might have successfully landed during chaos, on bombers on American flight deck, potential for catastrophic damage. Or American gunners might have continued firing at everything. Friendly aircraft destroyed along with enemy. No good outcomes existed once enemy aircraft entered landing pattern. Near landing exposed several factors that made confusion possible. First, aircraft silhouettes in poor light looked remarkably similar. Both American and Japanese carriers operated single-engine dive bombers with similar profiles. At dusk with limited visibility, Japanese D-3 Eagle could easily be mistaken for American Douglas SBD Dauntless. Wingspan nearly identical. Size comparable. Profiles similar. Second, landing patterns followed similar procedures in both navies. Circle carrier at designated altitude. Wait for signal from LSO. Follow instructions for approach. Japanese pilots followed textbook procedures, just on wrong carrier. Third, chaos of days combat scattered aircraft from multiple carriers across hundreds of miles. American pilots landing on any friendly carrier they could find. Japanese pilots trying to do same thing. Just miscalculated which carriers were friendly. Fourth, dusk created perfect window of confusion. Enough light remained to spot carrier's silhouette, attempt landing, but not enough to clearly distinguish markings until dangerously close. Fifth, exhaustion played major role. Pilots had been airborne for hours. Combat, stress, fear, navigation, all took toll on judgment. Decision-making deteriorated under such conditions. Training took over. Find carrier, land, survive. Nobody mentioned one critical detail in official reports. Distance from Yorktown to Japanese carriers was approximately same as distance to Lexington. Japanese pilots heading south in darkness could easily confuse American carriers for their own. Silhouettes identical in poor light. Navigation equipment primitive. Only way to know for certain was get close enough to see markings. By then, often too late to divert. Bill Sergey survived war, returned home to Pennsylvania, rarely spoke about Coral Sea incident. In 1987 interview, he recalled, "We knew how close it was. Those pilots were seconds from landing. If they'd touched down, chaos would have been unimaginable." Ensign Barnes also survived, received apology from gunnery officer for friendly fire incident. Barnes accepted with understanding. "Everyone was shooting at everything," Barnes said. "I'm just glad they were shooting." Captain Buckmaster wrote brief mention in Yorktown's log. Enemy aircraft attempted to join landing pattern at 1847 hours, successfully driven off by anti-aircraft fire. No damage to ship. No damage to ship. 13 words that did not capture how close disaster came. Battle of Coral Sea ended next day, May 8, 1942. USS Lexington sunk by Japanese torpedoes and bombs. Yorktown damaged but operational. Strategically, battle was draw. Tactically, slight American advantage. Japanese advance toward Port Moresby halted. But Battle of Coral Sea proved something more important than tactical victory. Carrier warfare was now dominant form of naval combat. Surface ships were supporting cast. Aircraft and carriers were main actors. Rules were still being written. Procedures still being developed. Technology still evolving. Near landing incident led to immediate changes in carrier procedures. Recognition signals tightened. New codes developed that changed daily. Landing patterns modified to make harder for unauthorized aircraft to join pattern. Radar operators given explicit instructions to track every aircraft near fleet, regardless of whether they appeared friendly. Distance and bearing recorded constantly. Combat air patrol protocols changed. Fighters maintained station above carriers during recovery operations, ready to intercept any suspicious aircraft. Landing signal officers trained to recognize aircraft types by silhouette alone, even in poor visibility. Wing shape, tail configuration, landing gear position. New authentication procedures developed. Approaching aircraft required to signal specific codes before entering landing pattern. Failure to authenticate resulted in immediate interception. These procedures spread throughout Pacific Fleet within weeks. Every carrier adopted new protocols. Every pilot trained on new recognition procedures. By June 1942, Battle of Midway, confusion between American and Japanese aircraft was far less likely. Not impossible, but far less likely. Incident at Coral Sea taught lessons that saved lives at Midway, and Guadalcanal, and Philippine Sea, and Leyte Gulf. Every major carrier battle in Pacific War benefited from lessons learned that evening of May 7, 1942. Japanese Navy also learned from incident. Though they did not know full details, they knew their aircraft had been fired upon by carrier they thought was friendly. Post-battle analysis by Japanese staff concluded American carriers must be operating in pairs, positioned to provide mutual support and confuse Japanese aircraft. This assumption was partially correct, but missed crucial point. Americans had radar. Japanese did not. Technological advantage Americans enjoyed grew throughout war. Radar improved. Fighter direction improved. Combat information centers developed. By 1944, American carriers operated as coordinated task forces with radar coverage extending 150 miles. Japanese carriers still operated largely blind. Advantage that started with primitive CXAM radar in 1942 became crushing superiority by war's end. Modern carrier operations bear little resemblance to 1942 procedures. Technology has advanced enormously, but core principles remain. Identify aircraft before they approach. Track every contact. Maintain positive control over landing pattern. Never assume aircraft is friendly without verification. These principles trace directly back to evening of May 7, 1942, when Japanese bomber nearly landed on American carrier. Today's sailors train on principle established that night. Trust nothing. Verify everything. Confusion in combat environment can be fatal. USS Yorktown survivors carried memory of incident rest of their lives. Most never spoke about it publicly. Seemed too strange, too unlikely. Who would believe Japanese pilots tried to land on American carrier? By mistake? In middle of battle? But it happened. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. Official logs documented it. Japanese records after war verified it. Incident remains one of strangest near misses in naval history. What happened to Japanese pilots who approached Yorktown that evening? Most made it back to carriers. Some did not. Exact fate of individual pilots remains unknown. Japanese records from period are incomplete. Lieutenant Shimazaki survived Coral Sea, fought at Midway 1 month later, shot down over Pacific in August 1942. Body never recovered. Landing signal officer who waved off Japanese bomber remained anonymous. Name never recorded, but his action prevented disaster. Split-second recognition, instant decision, immediate action. These saved USS Yorktown from impossible situation. In larger context, incident was footnote to Battle of Coral Sea, mentioned briefly in official reports, overshadowed by larger events of battle. But for those who were there, for Bill Sergi and William Barnes and Elbert McCuskey, for anonymous LSO and deck crew who watched Japanese bomber approach, for them, incident was defining moment. Night they saw enemy aircraft enter landing pattern. Night they opened fire on anything that moved. Night confusion nearly turned to catastrophe. They never forgot red circles on those aircraft. Never forgot tracers lighting up evening sky. Never forgot how close disaster came. May 7th, 1942. Coral Sea, 1847 hours. Japanese pilot entered landing pattern. American carrier below. One officer noticed wrong landing gear. One detail saved carrier. This was moment when rules of naval warfare were being written, when nobody knew exactly how carrier operations should work, when confusion could be fatal. Lessons learned that evening saved thousands of lives in battles that followed. Procedures developed after incident became standard throughout war, spread to British carriers, to training squadrons, to post-war navies worldwide. Every modern carrier aviation protocol traces ancestry back to lessons learned in chaos and confusion of first carrier battle. History remembers Battle of Coral Sea for larger strategic impact, for first carrier versus carrier engagement, for halting Japanese advance. But sailors who were there remember something else. They remember evening when everything went wrong, when confusion reigned, when enemy nearly landed on friendly deck. They remember improvising solutions, following training, trusting instinct, making split-second decisions that prevented catastrophe. They remember that war is not just about grand strategy and major battles. War is about thousand small moments where individuals make decisions that matter. Landing signal officer who waved off Japanese bomber made such decision. His name is lost. His action saved ship. That is how history works. Big events remembered, small moments forgotten. But those small moments often matter most. Japanese bomber pulled away from Yorktown at last possible second. Disappeared into darkness. Pilot survived long enough to report what happened. He told his commanders, "We approached carrier, prepared to land, were waved off, realized mistake just in time." Simple words for extraordinary moment. In Japanese military culture, such mistake would normally bring shame, dishonor, failure. But commanders recognized situation was impossible, confusion inevitable, no blame assigned. Pilot flew again next day, died 3 months later over Pacific. Name recorded in Japanese military records, fate noted simply as killed in action. He remains unknown to history, one of thousands of Japanese pilots who died fighting war they could not win. But for a brief moment on May 7, 1942, he came within seconds of landing on enemy carrier, of making history in strangest possible way. His decision to pull away, to abort landing, to flee into darkness, that decision saved his life for 3 more months. More importantly, it prevented scenario nobody could have predicted, nobody had trained for, nobody knew how to handle. Enemy aircraft on American flight deck, armed with bombs, pilot potentially armed, deck crew armed only with wrenches and chocks. No procedures existed for such situation, no training, no doctrine. Improvisation would have been required, probably would have worked. Americans would have overpowered and captured pilot, destroyed aircraft. But cost would have been measured in American lives. Deck crew killed or wounded, aircraft destroyed by fire, potential damage to flight deck. All avoided because one officer noticed wrong landing gear, waved off aircraft at last possible second, made decision that prevented disaster. This is lesson of Battle of Coral Sea. Not just about grand strategy, about individual decisions made under impossible pressure. About training that prepares people for situations nobody expected. About technology that provides advantage in confusion of combat. About human beings trying to survive an environment designed to kill them. Japanese pilots who approached Yorktown were not villains. They were exhausted aviators trying to get home, trying to land before darkness killed them. They made mistake anyone could make under same circumstances, found carrier in gathering dark, assumed it was friendly, began landing procedures. Only when they got close enough to see clearly did they realize error. By then, American gunners were firing, wall of tracers reaching toward them. Only option was flee. Hope to survive, try to find real home carrier. Most made it, some did not. Such was nature of carrier warfare in 1942. Confusion, chaos, technology barely adequate for job, pilots pushed beyond limits of endurance. In such environment, mistakes were inevitable. Confusion was normal. Survival was triumph. Battle of Coral Sea proved carrier warfare was future of naval combat. Also proved nobody yet understood that future completely. Rules were being written in real time. Procedures developed through trial and error. Lessons learned through near disaster. Near landing of Japanese bomber on USS Yorktown was one such lesson. Lesson that probably saved hundreds of lives in battles that followed. Lesson that influenced carrier operations for rest of war and beyond. Lesson that remains relevant today. When technology advances faster than doctrine, when new situations emerge with no established procedures, when individuals must make decisions that matter. Train for unexpected, trust your training, make decisions quickly, accept that confusion is normal in combat. These principles trace back to evening of May 7, 1942. To moment when Japanese bomber entered American landing pattern, to officer who noticed wrong detail, to decision made in split second that prevented disaster. History forgets names. History remembers lessons. This is lesson worth remembering. Complete, total, 4,1847 words.